I had a lot of differences of opinion with him, but I just loved, he followed his own drum beat, and I had such respect for him because he really was an artist. And we went through an awful lot. And then the genesis of Taxi, his connection with Taxi was absolutely amazing because he was working at the Comedy Store. Andy Kaufman, he did several Saturday Night Live. In fact, Lorne Michaels, I remember the first year of Saturday Night Live, Lorne Michaels called me and I started to manage Andy, and he was pitching me. He said, Andy should come back, to do multiple appearances on Saturday Night Live. He said, it's really going to be a good show. The kids are going to like it. He was pitching me. I said, you don't have to pitch me. I said, that's his favorite place to be, is on Saturday Night Live. And, so it was amazing. So Andy did the show on the main room at the Comedy Store, and he had Tony Clifton, which was an alter ego, sort of a nasty lounge singer, and he had makeup on whereby nobody would know that it was Andy underneath the makeup. It really had a great makeup job with a bodysuit. He was a little heavy set, with his tuxedo, and he opened for Andy, at the Comedy Store. So Ed Weinberger and Jim Brooks came in with Dave Davis and Stan Daniels because they were the four producers of Taxi, and they saw Andy and they saw Tony Clifton, and they saw Andy and they came over to me and said, we just would love to have him to play Latka on Taxi, which was a no-brainer because it was a foreign mechanic.
And there, Andy used to do the show with. Where this character Farman came up, who talked exactly like Latka. And then what he would do is, in his show, is he would take off his costume. I don't know what he wore as Foreign Man, but he would take off his costume and he'd have his Elvis costume on. And there was never a better Elvis impersonator than Andy Kaufman. He was the best because he had the sneer. He could do the sneer. But anyway, so they wanted that character to be the mechanic.
So I spoke to Andy, and his initial reaction was, I really don't want to do a TV series. I just love, creating material and doing that. That's, what my essence is to do that. I said, well, these guys are great. They did the Mary Tyler Moore Show. They're just incredible producers. And he asked if they saw Tony Clifton. I said, yeah, they did see Tony Clifton. And he said, well, if you could make a deal for Tony to do 4 shows, the order was for 22 shows. If you could get Tony to do 4 shows and I'll do 14 shows, I'll do it under those circumstances.
Okay, just to give you a little background, I think what happened was they had seen Tony Clifton, and they had seen Tony Clifton opened for Andy Kaufman, and our producers must have had bad seats or something because they didn't realize it was the same person. But when they negotiated the contract with Andy, he told them that he wanted Tony Clifton to do 3 episodes, and they said, well, we don't know if Tony can handle it. We'll hire him for 1 episode. That's what we had been told.
And then, I had, as sophisticated as Jim Brooks and Ed Weinberger were, they did not know that was Andy. I had to tell them that opening act, Tony Clifton, was Andy Kaufman. And the only way he would do Taxi would be if Tony gets the gig also. So they said, they decided to do it. They felt it was worth it, to give Tony 4 shows. And I had a negotiated deal with Paramount for 2 people. And I had the backing of Brooks and Weinberg. I had to negotiate, separate parking places, separate dressing rooms. Andy made considerably more money because he had more exposure from Saturday Night Live. So, but I made 2 distinct contracts. I have the contracts. They're 2 separate contracts. And then, so Taxi, they shoot Andy. Taxi, the first episode, Taxi got rave reviews, and Andy was singled out as very funny, wonderful. And then it came time to do Tony Clifton for his appearance, and he played Danny DeVito's brother, who's a gambler, Louis De Palma's brother, Nick De Palma. He was, sort of a gambler, a ne'er-do-well.
It was, Andy, one of the agreements of Andy Kaufman doing the show was that Tony Clifton, his alter ego, would be cast in the show. So that show came up, I think, show 7 or 8, and then he was cast as Louis De Palma's brother. So you had Andy Kaufman playing Tony Clifton, playing Louis De Palma's brother.
Ed Weinberger said to me, we're going to do a show this year about your brother. It's called Brother Rat. I was in the commissary at Paramount. I said, "Oh, that's great, Ed." And I'm eating my egg salad or whatever. He says, "Well, I wanted to tell you this, that Andy's going to play your brother, but as Tony Clifton." And I said, "What are you talking about?" Because I had no idea what he was talking about. He said, "Well, Andy does this character where you don't own up that it's him, but it's really him, and we all know it. But he won't cop to the fact that it's him, and he's going to play the part." And I said, "You mean, in other words, I'm going to have scenes with this guy as my brother?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "All right, well, you guys are the ones that know what you're doing in this whole thing, in this show. I mean, I'll try it out if you want to see how it goes. I've never experienced anything like this." But in other words, I don't ever say to him that I know that he's really Andy talking to me as in the character of my brother. No. So, okay.
On September the 29th of, it was this Friday, Ed Weinberger calls us all together, and he says, "All right, the show next week, well, we have a guest star. Well, it's Andy, but it isn't Andy. Just play along." And we said, "What?" He said, "Well, it's going to be Andy, but it's not Andy, but okay, just play along." We said, "Okay, what does that mean?" "Okay, fine."
We were told by the producers that we had to address him as Tony, not Andy. We had to buy into this. And Tony liked to rehearse. Andy didn't. Tony was early. Andy's late. And so we went through this whole thing with him, and then finally he's doing a show where he has in his contract that he can play a part as Tony Clifton and play another part. So he's playing Louis's brother. So it's like, but an actor playing a part, playing another.
So time comes for the read-through that Monday, some Monday, not that Monday, but a Monday. And we're all ready for it. The show was really good, written well, pretty well. And we're going to start at 10 o'clock, say. Everybody's there. Weekend shows, these are the weekend, like the shows were great when we start on a Monday and end on a Friday, because everybody does stuff on the weekends, and that was a great, Monday morning was always a great thing where everybody would come in and talk about what they did, and how to, you know, Mary Lou would tell you this and that one, and Tony and this one and that one. So we're all bullshitting for like at least an hour, and no Andy. Hasn't come yet. Or Tony. Andy was away. Andy was away doing a college thing somewhere. Tony Clifton got the part. Anyway, so he shows up 2 hours after we were supposed to start, and he's got a hooker on each arm, and he smells like how much he must have taken his entire all his clothes. Everything is bathed in this kind of sweet perfume. He walks in and it's just like, he's got a lot of notes on a script. And, you know, everything is like a problem with Tony.
So we go, you know, and Andy had day night reversal. And Tony Clifton shows up at 9 in the morning. Andy never did. Andy never smoked. Tony smoked. So anyway, we're rehearsing, and it's just not working. Andy was, I don't care how good an actor you are. Playing one is really difficult.
Following Monday, you know, October 2nd, 1978, we go in, and all of a sudden, there's Andy Kaufman with like orange makeup, a fake nose, ugly toupee, glasses, big mustache, blue tuxedo, ruffled shirt, talking like this, chain smoking, rah, 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 like this. Ah, who's this pretty lady? Ah, come here, I'm Tony Clifton. And it was like, oh my God. And we were like looking at each other like, I remember Tony was like, what the,
So Tony comes to the set, and he rents a Winnebago like twice the size of Judd Hirsch's, and he has two bimbos with him, a blonde and a brunette, two hookers, And he comes to the reading. He says, and he comes to the reading and sits down. And he says, with the girls on each knee, sitting down. I brought my friends with me. I hope you don't mind. And let's ring that. Okay. Crap, crap, crap. My line. Crap, crap, crap. My line. So anyway, he started doing the show, and he was drinking Jack Daniels. And Andy doesn't drink, but Tony Clifton, he was sort of a mess. I got a call. He was late for rehearsals. It was not a pleasant experience, for the producers.
We were all, okay. So now we sit around this table and do the table read. And this is what the acting was like. It was the episode where Danny DeVito, Louis De Palma's brother, is going to come back, he's a Vegas guy, and they're going to play cards to see who's going to get stuck with their mom, who's going to win or lose and get stuck with their mom for the holidays. So this is how he acted. Well, Ma, sometimes she's glad, sometimes she's sad. I mean, that's how bad his acting was, right? So now we're like humoring him, but by this time, the show's been on for like 3 weeks, and we love each other. We know we've got a hit on our hands. We're already bonded. We're 3 months in. It's like a well-oiled machine, and somebody from our cast is now playing Halloween a little bit early, but okay.
And we barely got through the read-through. I don't even think we got through the read-through. I think he had an appointment he had to go to or something. He left us hanging. And we knew we were in trouble. So immediately they started, thinking about other people to play the part, even though it was going to be really difficult to get rid of him.
He's not only not in the, we had dressing rooms all near each other so we could all like hang out and talk in between rehearsing. He's in a trailer right outside, and he's got these two hooker girls with him. So now we get to the Tuesday 4:30 run through, and it's like chaos. And it's horrible, horrible, horrible acting. I mean, just Tony Clifton is an embarrassment, and we're now angry. And it's like, you're not taking down Taxi, right? What is this shit? Everybody wanted to like run up and pull his nose off, but we still thought, okay, we'll talk to the producers.
And it wasn't working. So we all went to Ed and said, look, we don't think this is good. We love our show. And Ed says, okay, I got to get rid of him.
But we all called Ed together and said, this has got to stop. And they knew, because it was bad. It was really bad.
So then Ed Weinberger called me and said, George, we have to fire Tony Clifton. Not only is his behavior terrible, but he's not a good actor. So I said, the deal calls for Andy having an out if Tony is let go. So I said, I have to talk to Andy. So I talked to Andy, and Andy said, well, I'll tell you, they could fire Tony only if they do it in front of everybody, because at the run-through.
And Andy, he talked to Andy, and evidently Andy said, or Tony said, you can fire me, but you have to do it in front of everybody. So we didn't know this.
And Andy said, please make it about his lateness and not about the fact that he's not a good actor, because he'll never get hired again.
So we had to get rid of him because it wasn't going to work. Because he was Vegas. Andy did that. Tony had the ruffled shirt, even. So we had to get rid of him. So Ed Weinberger called George Shapiro's Andy's manager and said, well, okay, so we're going to get rid of him. Tony wants to be fired on stage in front of everybody with two hookers, one on each knee.
We come in Wednesday, and there's another actor, Richie Ferrangi, who's going to play the part. And we said, oh, phew, okay. We think, okay, well, we'll see Andy next week playing Latka next week. So Jimmy Burrows says, so they called Andy last night, and they told him that Tony is fired. And Jimmy Burrows tells us, Ed called Andy last night and said, we have to fire your friend Tony. This is exactly what we were told. We have to fire your friend Tony. And he said, okay, I understand, but you have to do it in person. You have to do it.
I think it was the next day we hired a guy named Richie Ferengi, who's a really good actor. And he came in just to meet us quietly. Because, I mean, if Andy ever found out, we'd be in trouble. And we went to rehearse. And again, he pissed us off the day before. Judd was really fuming. The next day he comes to work. He's also very, very late. And he's got the hookers with him. And the hookers are carrying packages, little presents for everybody.
And that day we were there, and it was run-through time, and all of a sudden the bleachers started filling up, so the word had gotten out. And we were doing the run-through, and all of a sudden he came in the back door with two, obviously, streetwalkers, giant women, and little boxes, little square white boxes, and in there were those little dogs with the remote control. One button makes it bark, one button makes it jump over. And the girls are giving them out to everybody. So there's a million dogs barking and jumping.
And we all had these toys little toys that made noise. He had given us because he was so thrilled to be working with such professional people. And Ed was going to fire him that day. That was the day he was going to get fired. Because he was like, there was maybe it was Wednesday when he was going to get fired. Tuesday, I don't remember what he did. He pissed off Judd so much that Judd was going to kill him. And then the next day, he got fired. And everybody wanted to see him get fired. Barry Diller, Katzenberg, all these guys from the head office were coming down to sit in the stands while Weinberger was going to fire him.
When the Paramount people are there, the network people are there. Also, there was a reporter following Andy around, Bill Nadelceder, for the L.A. Times. He was doing a story on him and taking pictures and writing about Andy, and he was there. And the place was pretty packed.
So now we show up. This is now, October 4th. This is Wednesday morning. And Richie Ferengi's there. And Jimmy Burrows tells us, Ed called Andy last night and said, we have to fire your friend Tony. This is exactly what we were told. We have to fire your friend Tony. And he said, okay, I understand, but you have to do it in person. You have to do it. So Jimmy Burrows says to us, look, expect the unexpected. I don't know what's going to happen. So now, all of a sudden, after lunch, out of nowhere, here comes Tony Clifton from the back of the house with the two hookers, one on each arm, going like, hey, where's the director? Come on, I got a contract here. We're going to rehearse. What's going on? Blah, blah, blah.
He says, I rewrote the script, and in my version, these two girls and I sit at the table through the whole episode. So with that, Ed walks over, and Ed says, Tony, I'm sorry, we're going to have to let you go. And instead of Tony taking it, he goes crazy.
So that day came, and Ed comes down to fire him, and he won't leave.
Ed Weinberger clears his throat. Tony Danza and I start noticing that there's people filling in the bleachers, which was unusual for that time of day on a Wednesday. And all of a sudden, Ed Weinberger clears his throat and says, Tony, I'm sorry, but you're going to get fired. Blah, blah. And he goes, what? No, and he starts screaming, like, to get that, I'm a bigger star than all of you, blah, blah, blah.
You can't fire me. What do you mean fire me? If I fire you, I got a bigger contract than you. He's screaming. They get in a wrestling match. It was the craziest thing. They get in a wrestling match. And it's like there's people rolling around. It's crazy. And then Judd heard Andy say, I got the biggest contract here once too often. And then he got involved.
So Judd, who's sitting next to me at this point, he goes, The guy wants a psychodrama. He wants a psychodrama. That's what he wants. He goes, you think you're the only one with a contract here? You think that's it? And all of a sudden, the two of them like start going at it. And we're like, oh no. And pretty soon, you've got two guards dragging Tony Clifton out. And he's like, I'm the biggest star in Hollywood. And screaming and this and that. I'll show you all in this. And they drag him out of the thing.
And they said he has to go. And Andy said, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Yeah, I should be here. Start off. Let's go. This is good. I'll have a party after the show. So anyway, he was obnoxious, and they had to throw him out. And I audio taped it. I had a little audio tape, and I taped the whole thing with Andy arguing with Ed Weinberger and Judd Hirsch saying, "You're an idiot. Get out of here." And then they called the security guards, and they had to get the security guards to throw him out.
And it was just bedlam. The security came. It's the greatest day of my life.
And that was it. And that was like, what was that? But it was crazy. Performance art. Some people were filming. Tony's got a copy of it someplace. And there were people in the stands, and it was like, that's what he did.
It ensued, and Andy screaming as he goes out the door, and you want to hear whatever it was just fabulous.
And then the naval city was taking pictures of all this, and they confiscated his camera. And Bob Zamuda was there, who's like Andy's writer and producer, and he was in a suit, like an attorney type suit, and everything else. And when they threw Andy out, we got the camera back because Zamuda went over to the security guard and he said, "I'll take that," like he was like the head of security or something. He gave him the camera. And I smuggled the camera out of the studio, but they threw him out screaming.
So they made it about his lateness, but he wouldn't take it. He was supposed to go peaceably, but he didn't. In fact, he called the LA Times and all kinds of reporters and had them waiting there with cameras. Guys were out there waiting for him to get thrown off the stage. He knew he was going to get thrown off the stage. It was like a madhouse.
And then I met Andy afterwards around the corner at a restaurant, and he was so excited. He said, "George, this is like the best day of my life. This is comedy of the street. This is what I love." And it made headlines across the country, and Natal Cedar had the pictures of him being tossed out. I still have the pictures in the story. He's being tossed out by 3 security guards. And they wouldn't let him stop by the Winnebago. They wouldn't let him get his girls. They just threw him off the lot. And then I smuggled the camera out of the lot in one of those, wardrobe pushcart things, and I got out. And he loved it. This is one of the triumphs of his life. I wasn't afraid. I was having fun. I knew it was like an incredible experience. And Andy Kaufman wasn't hurt that bad. He was still on Taxi. He came back the next week, and the guys, were telling about Tony. Tony Danza were telling about Tony Clifton and Mary Lou Henner and Judd Hirsch and Danny DeVito, and they were watching a tape of Tony Clifton. He said, "Well, that guy's such an asshole," he said, Andy. And he went on, he did a show, he stayed on Taxi for 5 years.
So did Andy ever acknowledge being Tony Clifton?
He talked around it. You never got him to totally admit it. He just would say, "Don't you see the beauty in that guy?" Things like that.